Okay. Good morning, everyone. Pura vida, your life. Welcome to this week's Dharma Talk. Here at beautiful Bali Rica in beautiful Costa Rica and on the amazing internet. This morning, Mark is going to open our session with a reading. He and I have been talking more about the topics that we've had, particularly last week. And so I'm going to follow through with some other thoughts on that today. Keep your ears open and your mind rolling, and we'll have some discussion. I'll try and keep it short enough that we can have a little more talk. So here we go. Mark, please take it away. This is a reading from the Dhammapada, or the teachings of the Buddha. So Mark.
Choices. We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. Speak or act with an impure mind, and trouble will follow you, as the wheel follows the ox that draws the cart. We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. Speak or act with a pure mind, and happiness will follow you as your shadows, unshakable. Look how he abused me and beat me. He threw me down and robbed me. Live with such thoughts, and you live in hate. Look how he abused me and beat me. Look how he threw me down and robbed me. Abandon such thoughts, and live in love. In this world, hate never yet dispelled hate. Only love dispels hate.
Beautiful. Yeah. Okay. If you hang out in sanghas, it's a bunch of Dharma people, you will often hear a saying that is very homespun Dharma, very kitchen table practical Dharma, that can be majorly annoying if you are not of a mind to hear it. It's annoying because you know it's the truth. And the saying is this: everything is an opportunity to practice. Everything is an opportunity to practice. This is not something we take down for Sundays or special occasions. This mess. Sorry, guys, there's cats again. They're here with me, everywhere like spirits. And we've been talking about right speech and all the associated things, including a lot of the lack of truth or the misunderstanding of truth. Certainly by the amount of violence that is being disseminated globally in every direction. This is an age of violence, and how it relates to us as we practice the Dharma. Love, love, love. What does that mean? We ask the same thing: truth, truth, truth. What is the truth? The Buddha was interested in what I first heard was the nature of reality. And I didn't understand it. And he also was interested in our true nature. And I didn't really know how to relate to that. It was all mysteries, and I bowed to them, and we all bowed to them. And I still don't have the answers. You may not have the answers, but you do have that one answer. And how is it that that is the one answer in all spiritual work, that it all ends up with that one word, which he segued so nicely into in his last talk, love. It boils down to this. If you have to explain something, try to explain it as you would to an 8, 9, or 10-year-old. Keep it as clean and simple as possible. And it kind of boils down at its simplest, I hope not too simple to be simple-minded, that spirituality is not the same as religion. Spirituality is universal. It needs no labels. It is the flow of energy of the universe. It doesn't need any labels. It doesn't need any description. It is simply there. And it operates, as does everything according to Buddhism and some of the others, on a spectrum. From the lowest to the highest energy, vibration. In the beginning was vibration. In the beginning was the word, was the translation of that. Okay? So if we are energy beings, we are beings that have been created with and from that energy. And energy is always divided into positive and negative. And the reason love is the highest order is that love is the truth at the heart of creation. Negative energy is destructive. It is not part of the divine plan of creation. We don't know how to define that divine plan. We've defined it in many ways. We worship it, or we consider it in many ways. But why is love, love, love the highest vibration? It's because it is the point of manifestation of creation, divine creation. Because we call it divine because we don't understand it. It is a mystery. So last week, when Mark reached that point, and he said, I give you one word, and there was sort of anticipation. I could feel it in the air. And he gave you that one word. And that one word was love. And Sharon immediately said, oh, when he said it, I exhaled. Oh, yes. That's a yes. I understand that. I get it. But it is quite possible that among us there are people who, with apologies to Tina Turner, thought, oh, criminy, what's love got to do? I don't get it. I don't understand. Why is love this elevated thing? Life is love because it's created. Now, Dave, at the end of the session, asked me a really good question. I thought before I forget it, I'll clear it up. It's about, in effect, something that's caused me to think about expansion. Dave said, why, when we talk about all sentient beings, when I do the meta, do I only mention humans? But he's absolutely right. I narrowed it kind of down to that for what we're doing. But all sentient beings include all beings who have perception and feelings. This includes animals, particularly We can spot it in our animals that they are sentient. They have emotions. But it's also, we're beginning to find out, the tomatoes scream when you cut them. That there are all kinds of vibrations in trees and even in rocks. So in a sense, when we talk about the universe being one thing, we can include literally everything. The cockroach, the elephant, everything. So this is why when we talk about love, on a spectrum, from the lowest vibration, which is hatred, to the highest vibration, which is love. That's why we attribute all of our practice, all of our spirituality, we compress it into that one word. Did everybody kind of get that? I mean, love takes so many forms. So to understand it, if you still feel cynical, study the difference between conditional and unconditional. We talk about that a lot. Relative and absolute. Everything on the spectrum divides between two, and everything ends up being one. So that if you have hatred and you have love, when you finally reach the true understanding of love, you have the beginning of the highest form of compassion, which takes in even the hate. It expands without conditions. It has left the dualistic world and entered the mono world, the universe. So that's not really so hard to understand. And the big question, which I don't know that any of us had the answer, is why don't we practice? Why are we living in such a desperately troubled world? I don't know. You don't know. It's just out there. And so the Buddha says, okay, you can't really do anything about everything. You're part of everything, but you can't really do anything about out there. You have to start here. And you start with practicing your spirituality. Let's face it, we're all a little bit hypocritical. The hypocrite being someone who does not live by the same standards he expects everybody else to live. So we need to say, okay, I don't want to be so confused by the spectrum and by the Dharma saying it's the middle way, that I fall into the trap of spiritually moral equivalency, where if evil is just one end of the spectrum and love is the other, there's really no difference between them. It's all one. It doesn't make any difference. It doesn't matter where I place myself on the spectrum. You don't put yourself by middle way. You don't mean that there's actually this one dividing point and you've got a foot on either side. It means that within the spectrum, you find your grounding, your value system. You have, according to the Third Noble Truth, choice. And you can choose positive energy with complete understanding that there is negative energy and you're not going to get rid of it. You have to learn to create your reality within, by choice, within the flow of positive energy. You are not going to achieve that by eradicating negative energy, because you can't. So a huge problem in religion is that the focus became on eradicating sin, until the people who were eradicating sin in other people became horrible people themselves. So what you need to do is understand dualism, that we live in a world that is relative, which is what Mark was doing with the cup. How you perceive things does not mean that what he perceives is not true, because it's not the same as what you perceive. It means that there is truth in a very wide spectrum, and it depends on where you're standing. And that includes where you choose to stand spiritually. Where am I in this flow of energy? With whom do I cast my preferences? And those become the basis of your values practiced. Now, it took me a long time until it really struck me with full force of the absolute beauty of the myth, not the truth if you're going to be literal, but the myth of the truth of love as told in the story of the Buddhist awakening, his enlightenment. When he sat down, and for 49 days he didn't move, because he was going to understand the truth. And Mara, who represents negative energy, came to him and threw it all at him. And when seduction and money and all the riches of the world and all the comfort did not sway the Buddha, he said, okay, I have to kill you. And he brought forth an army, 10,000 guys or whatever the myth says, with bows and arrows. And they all lined up. And they all took aim, and they all shot their arrows at the Buddha. And when they reached a certain level around him, the arrows fell to the ground as flowers. End of the myth. Beginning of the understanding that your greatest protection from all the problems of out there, and even all the answers to the problems in here, is that love is the space of power that cannot be breached. And you, by practice, empower that space around you. Let's say it's from here around this room. And while you are in the full force of creative love energy, you are armored against all the negative stuff. Now I know you can take it from there and bring it together, and then we'll talk about it. We don't need to say much more. I would like to say this before we start. I want Mark to throw his in here because he's more expressive. The talk or the passage that he read, we've talked about all kinds of things regarding truth and spirituality, is about karma. If you if your thoughts or if your thinking is impure, trouble will follow you. If your thoughts, if your emotions are pure, you can self-liberate and you will achieve an enduring happiness. That's what it's saying to you. Your choice. But sometimes, I don't know whether we just ignore it or whether we don't understand it. We're going to, of the 5 reasons we usually talk about in, just said turn it over to you and I'll keep talking. I can't stop. It's like they turn me on. I'll get
We're good. We're good. I'm
it.
listening intently, so please continue.
Okay, well, I forgot what I was saying. But anyway, here we are. We're here for each other with unconditional friendliness. But I was talking about karma, and I'll go back to that in a little while. We create our own karma. Nobody else hands us their karma. Karma is the most intensely personal connection to the world that we have because it informs everything we think, say, and do. So when we say the truth is love, we're not saying that lying or untruth or falsehood is not real. It's very real. It's just something that we can face in ourselves first, and we can protect ourselves with the creation of this. I'm going to shut up, give you a chance to talk, and then everybody else, please pull your thoughts together, and we'll all talk.
So one of the things that we hear Ruthie say on a regular basis is this notion of confronting the outside world. And she often shares the story of the Buddha and Mara. And at no point in hearing that story do we find ourselves imagining the Buddha sitting underneath the Bodhi tree, dispelling and dispersing and killing off all evil. Nor does it say that it doesn't exist. It says that it does exist. And at that particular time, that energy was working to change the Buddha, who in his own right was changing himself. But what we do hear the Ruthia saying is in the transformation, in the Buddha's desire to become purity, to become truth, and to become understanding, he was prepared for whatever would occur when he sat under the tree. He wasn't seeking nirvana or enlightenment or anything. He said, I'm going to come to truth. And if that truth had been anything other, he would have come to that. But what he came to was this internal perfection, this peace. And what that did, being an energetic being, we're all energetic beings, is it shifted his energy. And when it shifted his energy, and we're all energetic beings, it created a field, because we all have a field around us. We've proved it scientifically over and over again. It changed the field that was around him so that anybody who came to the Buddha and talked to the Buddha, in order to reach the Buddha, would have to change their way of speaking, because he was unchangeable at that point. He had become a reference point. So anything that was going to be changed would have to change itself to be able to talk to him. Does that make sense? Did I express that okay? So it isn't so much that the Buddha was trying to change the negative and the uncomfortable out in the world. He just said, I am here and I welcome you to come to talk to me. And when you come to talk to me, this is the language that I speak.
Right. And when you come into that sphere,
yeah, when you come into when you come into that sphere, see, I was changed just by that moment. I may have said this before, but I had the most amazing conversation with a friend of mine who was a Sundance leader. And we were at the Sundance and we were sitting having a conversation over food. And we always started with this one sentence and then the conversation went from there. But his question to me was the difference between religion and spirituality. To which I answered, well, I please continue because I could go on for. And he said, religion is for those that are afraid of going to hell, and spirituality is for those that have been through hell.
Oh, that's a good definition.
Yeah.
Not
So
what I would have said, but it's a good.
yeah, well, the reason is
Never occurred
it's
to me.
that
I like that.
untoward energy, or that energy that surrounds the Buddha in this story. Um, it can be debated by anybody who hasn't experienced it. But if you've experienced something untoward in your life, something that is unpleasant, and something that actually creates you or encourages you to make a change in your life path because of its intensity, there's no way you can deny that. There's no shunning it or pushing it away or saying it didn't exist. And so the choices that you make from that point on are in the awareness of what can occur. It's not so much you're running away, pushing away, or shifting, as much as you're making a choice that leads you to
Self.
to self, to that purity, to that truth. That's one of the reasons I like it. It's one of the reasons why I like Ruthie's story about that she comes back to about the Buddha, but also how she keeps reminding us in a good way that our thoughts do create our responses in the world. The way I approach somebody on the street, I walk up to somebody and I'm very angry and forceful. That person is naturally going to react in a way that is in keeping. They're going to shun me, push me away, repel, even more force to suppress me. And from my perspective, the outside world is nasty and evil because it always does this to me. It always tries to beat me up. So I've got to defend myself more. I've got to become stronger, smarter, this, that, and the other to defend. And the outside world equals it, comes back with even more stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But the Buddha didn't. The Buddha shunned all of that responses, and he came into that one quiet, gentle place. And he said, I'm going to observe my world from this one point. I know who I am. I may not agree with all that I am, but I do know who I am. I know this body. I know the space that it's inhabiting. So I know that this is true. And the more I understand this, the more I can relate it to what's occurring in the world around me. And then I notice what's true about that. Before I pass it back to Ruthie, there's something that happens. I get a lot of phone calls, and the people will tell me what a problem is, and because they feel I need to know so that I can walk them out of it. And what I find fascinating is, people will say, oh, my house has these demon spirits, or my house has this, or my house has that. And I listen, and I need you to clean my house. I need you to get rid of it. I need you to push all this stuff away. And the entire time I'm listening, I'm looking for the opportunity to say to them, they're only there because you've invited them in. They only exist because you opened the door and said, come on in, let's dance. And you can't say that in the beginning because they don't want to hear it. It's not what they want to hear. What they want to hear is, here's how I'm going to fix things. Mm-hmm. I was part of a 3-hour call in the States, and there was a psychic there who's saying you need to change the energy of the house. And I was talking to the house owner, and within 20 minutes, the house owner was giggling and laughing and feeling really joyful. And the person was saying, when are you going to do the house clearing? And I said, I've been doing it for 20 minutes. And they said, what? And I said, to the house owner, I said, how do you feel in the home right now? And he said, I'm aware that presence is still there, but I feel much better about myself. And it's like, now you have the ability to remove this presence yourself. You have this awareness that change has occurred. And this is where Ruthie and I were kind of chatting today, is often what we perceive as evil is just change. It's just something moving from misunderstanding into understanding. And the amount of force that I put against it, or remember I was saying, the more energy I put into it, the more force I'm going to get back. And as we talked about last week and we talked about today, this compassion that whatever is confronting me, whatever is presented before me, if I can just breathe and realize this is not a comfortable situation, I'm not pleased with this, But the feeling that I'm feeling right now is just telling me that I don't understand. Because if I was in that place that Ruthie was just talking about, if this absolute perfect love, I would have nothing but absolute compassion for whatever was before me.
We just hold that as a North Star.
Yeah.
You know, because we do live in a dualistic world. We do live in a conditioned world.
Mm-hmm.
We do live in a world of relativity. And what we're talking about here is an unconditioned, absolute, totally altruistic world. But if you don't know that there exists such absolute oneness, you are kind of doomed to being stuck in the causes of suffering. And the causes I think that you're talking about more than anything else, a part of the causes of suffering we seldom talk about, which are delusion and ignorance. We don't know or we can't feel the truth of oneness. And I'm not there yet. Sometimes I am. But then, here you go.
Yeah, one of the teachings that I love is to walk people into an unconditional love. And it's put in my book, but the way that I phrased it, because I wasn't going to talk about God or anything else, so I just called what the nature of a prayer is to all love, to unconditional love. That's where I devote my energy, and that's where I devote my presence, and that's where I devote my thoughts. Not to a being, an entity, a presence, a space, but to unconditional love. And that unconditional love is the group of people that are in my Sangha right now, in here right now. You all are sharing in some sort of type of love. So if I can stand absolutely, totally, spiritually naked with each one of you and see how I look to you in that spiritual nakedness, aware of all my flaws, all of my the points where maybe I think I'm pretty good. If I can stand there in absolute truth and say, this is who I am, and if I can see the vision that you have of me, the good visions that you have of me, sometimes the visions that aren't so good, but if I can see that vision, it inspires me to become that person. And anywhere where there's a flaw or a defect or something that I'm in the process of changing, or something that is limited that I'm looking forward to enhancing into more clarity, I see that too, and I realize where I am working on my personal thing. And so that anything that comes into that space now is going to be a reflection of me. Back to me. Yes?
Yes. Well, I use it, absolutely. Everybody agree? Are we all in agreement? Yeah. The way I keep putting it, because it works for me and hopefully it will work for other people, to kind of narrow down this wonderful teaching of the Buddha, is that where we place our thoughts is the direction of our life. And if we can look at ourselves and the world around us through the lens of love, meaning creativity rather than destruction, I think, we enjoy so much liberation from delusions that we can change the world. Sort of apropos of nothing. I learned something from my husband that I didn't learn from the Buddha. Oh, several things, but Anyway, it was that he would not argue. He would not argue. He was the most peaceful man I think I ever knew, but he would not argue, and it drove me crazy. I wanted to
Let's
debate.
get into
I
it.
wanted to get into it, and he wouldn't argue. And the way he put it was this: a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. Don't argue. What good is it going to do for him? He's just going to dig in deeper, and you're going to go at it harder, and don't bother. Work on yourself. Again, this takes us back to working without trying to change everything out there. And it brings me back to what I think is the biggest lesson. If anyone here has not read the Book of Joy, which was the last book, I believe, that the Dalai Lama worked on with Desmond Tutu, an Episcopalian archbishop and the head of the Tibetan Buddhists. They were asked, what do we do about all the suffering in this world? And their answers were wonderful. I've told you this a million times, but get it for anybody who's new. The Dalai Lama says, don't add to it. What do you do about the suffering in the world? Just don't add to it. That's your job. You're not going to fix it all. You're not going to erase it all. But don't add to it. And the Desmond Tutu, true to what Diane is responding to with the Happiness Project, said, start where you are and do what you can. And where it begins is looking at life through the lens of love. Love for yourself, love for all sentient beings. And I think that probably ultimately ends up even being rocks. Love it all. And I can go on and talk about karma, but I'd rather hear, for today, we can talk about karma later, another time, because it's such an important part of the actual realities of spirituality. But how about throwing it open?
Yeah, well,
How are we doing on time?
I'm good, I guess.
Well, we ran a little bit late.
10:48. So we're doing just fine.
Okay.
One of the things that does get confusing before we open the floor to consider is often when we're sitting here and we're exploring the energetic self, the consciousness, and then the physical body and its relationship to the world around us, is we get so caught up in what's occurring to us that we forget this tiny little thing is that we actually came here to have these experiences. And so on one hand, here we are running around going, I'm enlightened, shine upon me. But the reality is we move from that perfection, that understanding, to here to have this experience. And what we're trying to do, more than anything, is we're trying to explore the world around us to the very best that we can. And when you're experimenting or you're moving into it, you're exploring something, it means you don't understand it yet. So chances are when you go into that space, you are not the best example of yourself because you're in transition.
Oh,
It is not my best self that goes into the unknown. It might be the best self in other
I
situations.
can't wait around for me to be perfect. All right, I just got to work with what you got.
You got to work with what you've got. And that's where we open the floor. Nice segue, thanks.
Nice segue. And it's true.
It is.
I was listening to the news, and a couple of thoughts happened. It's really depressing to listen to the news. And in our conversation last week, and Jeff was saying on the way out, he was saying, I just have to turn it off. And I think a lot of us are like that. But I said, but listen to this and see if it rings true. He is always teaching us about detached involvement, which is exactly what the Buddha said. All suffering is related to attachments. So you have to learn to let go. So what occurred to me is if you're of a mood to turn the world off, turn the news off, stop the world, I want to get off, is instead of turning your back or turning away from the world, step back and just observe it. Protect your own integrity, but don't try and shut it out. We need to know what's going on in the world because we're part of the suffering human race. Does that make sense? But you don't turn away, you just step back. And we go back to observation.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I seem to notice in listening to the news, it's all opinion pieces now. It's not news. News is factual, or should be, and certainly factually based. All these opinion things just kind of dissolve into propaganda for different agendas. So take a small example. You walk into a room, there's a body on the floor, clearly dead. There's a man standing over the body with a gun. Someone asks you what happened here. The facts are there's a body on the floor and a guy with a gun standing over it. That's as far as the facts go. The truth is not the same. You don't know the truth of this situation. You now are going to the realm of opinions. Well, I think this guy with the gun didn't like that guy that's on the floor and he shot him. You know, okay, so then that gets going and the guy ends up getting the death penalty himself or something, and it wasn't him at all. Maybe he was trying to take the gun away from the man to save him from himself, committing suicide, and went off and killed him anyway. Who knows what the truth really is? Please begin from a position of love in your life. Look through that lens and please sift what you hear to begin with facts. What is the fact? The truth will come with evidentiary facts. And over again for all these years, every true spiritual practice ends up in love. So you can kind of count on it. And that's all I have to say.
Sure.
So oh, you're going to miss me when I'm gone.
Just to blend two things, though, let's, if we can, just for a moment, three things actually. The first one is that the person's in the room, person holding a gun, person on the floor, and the Buddha walks in.
Okay.
Okay? The Buddha sits down and doesn't say anything and just sits in quiet reflection and observes the situation. The person with the gun feels at some point compelled to talk to the Buddha. He realizes he has a weapon. The Buddha is no threat. Perhaps he puts the gun down. And the Buddha,
his truth.
Buddha sits and waits to hear the story.
Yeah, be patient.
Be patient. Again, we were talking that when the Buddha was sitting at the Bodhi tree, Mara comes. He doesn't go out and try and figure out what Mara is doing. He doesn't go out and do anything. Mara comes to him, and in that, the truth ends up being revealed that anything that comes towards the Buddha turns into flowers or peace or love or whatever. In this particular case, the Buddha sits there and waits for the story to be revealed to him.
And the truth generally will out, but before you jump to assumptions, all you really have to offer to the police when they arrive is I walked in here and I saw a body on the floor and a man standing there with a gun. I have no more to offer you. Now it's up to you to investigate.
Part two of the story is just the same way I was willing to express myself and be spiritually naked in front of everybody, seeing people that care about me and their thoughts about me and choosing to be that way. So too does the person with the gun. Feeling that loving compassion, feel compelled to sit and be the highest version of what the Buddha sees of them, and in turn will tell the whole story from the most truthful point of view that person
what
is,
he saw,
from what he experienced and
saw.
saw. Yeah. There's no conjecture in this. There is room for compassion and loving compassion.
But I think what we're saying is we try to keep a clear head and an open heart.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can move from that position to the best of our ability, we don't always practice what we preach. We all have a streak of hypocrisy in us. And we also have a lot of latent bad stuff there that given just the right causes and conditions, there it is. anger, fear.
Okay,
So anyway, will
floor is
somebody
open.
else
Please,
please open?
stand.
Okay, I know you don't want to hear this probably, Ruthie, because, but politics always comes to
Oh, the
mind.
politics, that's our government. That's what, there we are. But I would not like to get personal with it.
Okay, but I'm just trying to understand this in the concept of what's going on in the world right now. I have a view that the other side is evil.
It's
sometimes.
overwhelming, and it is
It is,
evil.
yeah.
You got
So
evil
how-
on one end and virtue on
Yeah.
the other.
So how does this love thing work out in that? How
It
does play
sees
itself
the
out?
evil, and it does not imitate it.
Of course, you don't add to it.
Don't add to it.
Right.
And do what you can to overcome the ill effects of it. Don't try and change the evil doer.
Yeah,
You really can't.
How about if we looked at it another way? What if you and I were to have a conversation? And I don't really know you. I just know you from the people who know you. And the people that know you, I'm not talking to the people that think that you're amazing. I'm talking about the middle of the road that think, yeah, you're just a pretty nice guy, or gal, or, all of this.
Mhm.
And then you and I are about to have a conversation, and somebody says to me, but you just got to be careful because Sandy can get really riled up, and there's a chance she'll get angry and attack you. And I'm like,
Blame it on Sandy.
And I'm like,
It's all her fault.
well, that's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Anyway, so you and I are about to have an important conversation, but this is sitting in the back of my head, and I don't even know if it's true. But you come in, and you're passionate. You're excited about what you want to talk about, and you feel that this is a wonderful opportunity for change, for a supernal moment where we can both be in an equal space. In your exuberance, I mistake it as you trying to take over the conversation. You trying to manipulate me
We don't know
into your
anybody
way
who
of
does
being,
Right.
and I become resistant
Because of what you've heard.
because of what I've heard. You perceive my defense as being a judgment or something like that.
And then I attack you.
Well,
That's the problem.
you may, but what I was going to say is you're going to put more energy, more force into
Yeah.
helping me to understand. All the while, from my perception, I'm beginning to think that you might not be on the level of an evil person, which is not absolutely true at all. And the problem that we have in our political systems, not just the one that's occurring in that big country over there, but in all of the countries, with the exception to a lesser degree of those that are run by women, but that's for another time, is what's happening is people are getting so caught up in the personalities and not in the facts. Noam Chomsky said in 2016 that there's a huge thing that is occurring right now. The media is caught up in about some guy tweeting at 3:00 in the morning, and we're not talking about the big issues.
Yeah.
Why
Absolutely.
is it we're not talking about the big issues?
Yeah.
And so for 4 years,
Yeah.
it was about a person, his persona, his inappropriateness,
Yeah.
his truth, because he was true a few times. And we became so focused on that we forgot the big picture. And what ended up happening? The pot boiled over, Black Lives Matter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Why aren't we talking about those things? And so to your point, it isn't about something necessarily being evil as it is about being misunderstood on both sides of the equation.
Both sides, yeah.
Because in that story, I told it from my perspective, but what if you also had a story about Mark? Mark thinks he's great. Mark thinks he's spiritually evolved along everybody else, and he's going to talk your ear off. And at some point you can say, he's going to talk my ear off. Well, then I better put force into it so I can get, and here we are having this conversation, and you're right, and I'm right, or I'm wrong, and you're wrong, and we're not communicating. But if we can come back into that center, so what Ruthie is saying, observe politics.
Stand back.
But why be emotionally engaged in it? It's hard not to when the very nature of it is to emotionally rile you, which is what Mara does to the Buddha.
That's
But the
exactly
Buddha
right.
sits there calmly saying, this is actually predictable. This is expected. I would expect no less from you coming from where you're coming from. I will stay here and I will wait. until we can have a meeting of the mind. But I have all of eternity to wait,
Well, you have to remember things do change.
always.
Can I make a comment?
And
Yeah, please.
you may be in a position of patience.
I agree with everything that he laid out, and I understand the dilemma.
Speak
But
up
it's a
on it.
strategy that's being implemented. That if you like, don't look here while I'm doing all these other things. Look here.
Hmm.
So those things at 3 a.m. are distractions.
Absolutely.
It don't necessarily have to be factual, because most of it aren't, is it?
Yeah.
But it's don't look here while I'm doing something else.
Yep.
Argue about that.
But again, if we're sitting in silent observation, I mean, for the people here in Costa Rica, and you ask them about what's going on politically anywhere else in the world, what do they say?
Not my problem.
No, that they look and they go, no sé, yo no entiendo. Don't understand. And it's like, well, why? How can you not understand this? It's because I'm tilling the ground. I have my machete and I'm cutting this. It's not important to them. But it is important to the people that they're working for, that they're cutting the grass for, and they see that these people are pretty loud.
Because we are. Can I say something about what you just said? Reminds me of something else. When we're talking about lying versus truth, lying cannot stand straight up in the light. And if you really want to know about, truth can. It can tolerate all the light you can throw at it. But if you really observe people and wonder whether they're lying or not, distraction is one of the main things they will do. This is a situation. Look over here at what this guy did. Okay, that's moral equivalency. Oh, you thought that I was doing the wrong thing? Well, look at what your guy did. Okay, drawing you off of a center point where you are is a main reason. Blaming someone else and saying that they are doing what you're doing. That they tell a lie and then they accuse the other guy of being a liar. It's very strange. But that ability to turn things over, to blame, if you're going into yourself, ask yourself, how many times do I have to make excuses for myself? Liars make a lot of excuses. And we lie to ourselves. We do. It's just there it is. So if you find that you're making excuses for your behavior, look for lies within yourself. If it's always somebody else's fault, look for lies within yourself. If you're always wanting to shift the conversation and get away from, the truth, that's all I have to say. But you really can begin to see it. I find that I heard a story. I listened to a news broadcast. It had a general speaking about the Ukrainian war. And someone asked him about diplomacy. And he said, oh, no, we're not far enough along in the conflict to open an avenue for diplomacy. And I'm like, what? War is a failure of diplomacy. You don't wait till everything is destroyed to sit down and talk. You do it before. So anytime, we have lost track of a lot of stuff. When we put weapons before lives of our children. When we put a brown bag over the head of the Statue of Liberty. All of these things, they are political. But there's a place and a time for the discussion because it arouses a lot of ill will in people. And we come here and are together to sort of get some kind of barrier to that ill will. Do you agree?
Yes, absolutely.
One of the things that we did last week is we walked into a problem, a discomfort. And I told you I did it deliberately. And the reason I did that is because, from my perspective, we humans have a tendency to talk about things on a philosophical or a grand experience, an exalted destination, but we forget that we're actually here in a physical body doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I encouraged and excited the room by saying segue, continue, because where we were going to go to are the absolute problem wherein we recognize that we're unable to understand lying, because at some point you have to lie to protect or save. And I was suggesting that
There's a spectrum there.
yeah, there's a spectrum. But the next thing that would happen was to show everybody or let everybody see that there is a way out of what you're feeling in that particular moment, and the word was love. And as soon as you came into that word, it sort of went, right, that makes sense. And that is the answer, how we
Not
get
for
out of
everybody.
that.
Some people are still in that cynical, what's love got to do with it point of view. I mean, and they say, what difference does it make? Why does love matter if it's a world is just,
Then for
So-
somebody who would say that, I would hear
Well,
a
but
lot of pain.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is there are people, you have to recognize it. And
Yeah.
they're the ones that cause all the trouble.
So you're saying just distance yourself from those people, or just detach them.
Observe, but detach yourself
Detach,
emotionally.
Well, that's what a lot of people
That's-
are doing, like you were talking about earlier, the facts, the fact-based arguments and fact-based information. That it's all become opinion now, and the opinion is easy. It's not based on facts; it's based on belief. And people who are distancing themselves from that, they're not reading anything. They're disengaged.
They're
from
turning
the
it
news.
all up. That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying.
In
Don't turn away
overwhelming
from it.
numbers
Just step away from
around the world. People are just turning off the news. And guess what's happening? The voting rates are plunging
it.
almost
Mhm.
every country. And so that may not be a solution, right? To disengage and watch it.
It's, you have to wait it out now because it's a very powerful negative force in the world right now. We're in that sort of a dark space globally.
Yeah, it's a
Politically.
critical problem.
Have you noticed, well, one of the things that I've noticed in my life in watching news is how blatantly out in the open the dissemination of lying is. People lie and then they sit there and they repeat it until they beat you to death with it, as if it were the truth. And when the evidence is presented, they just say the same lie over again.
But it's been effective.
Huh?
It's been effective. There's people who finally believe it.
Well, but it's the blatancy of it. The fact that we no longer sugarcoat it with any kind of sophistication at all. It's just out there.
I have a question.
What?
How do you know that what you're saying is true?
By the consequences, and that's why we're going to get into karma someday.
And I think this is what you're saying, and what we're saying
We're all aware
is-
of this.
is I
what we do
recognize
about
that I'm in an uncomfortable situation. I realize there are viewpoints that are being expressed to me, which I do not agree with, by the way, and I'm happy to tell you why. But the
Yeah,
reality
yeah,
is am I not becoming, as that saying said in war, I looked into the eyes of my enemy and I saw myself. Am I not becoming so rigid in my standpoint
Mm-hmm.
that I have now dismissed any truth from the other side? And it's actually the two
Well
truths
put, Mark. Yeah.
that connect to make
Yeah.
the connection, the compassion and the
Mhm.
understanding. But I'm so angered and so motivated by seeing something a particular way that I'm unable to see where I'm out of alignment. Possibly.
So, where does humor stand in this whole thing?
You don't have a sense of humor, it just isn't funny. That's a wavy gravy statement. That's a truth. That's a truth. There you are. You gotta have a sense of humor.
Yeah.
Or
Humor's
you
the
really
reason.
will, you really will crumble. You have to see the
Yeah.
absurdities.
Because that's where I get my political information. I just watch satire, and then eventually read up on it later.
I agree with you. That
You
is
said that
Natalie here.
reality.
Natalie's the one that said, "Quit watching the news. Just watch the comedians giving you." And I started doing that, and it's stuck, and it really was wonderful advice.
Stephen Colbert.
Stephen Colbert
So well.
and Jimmy Kimmel, he knocks it right over the fence a bunch of times. So there you are. Anyway,
The trouble is, a lot of people think that's watching the news.
I think that's what.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
He said the
That's
trouble
what-
is that some people
Yeah,
think that's
Facebook
watching the news.
Well, it is for me,
But
John, you're a
again,
purist. You're a
Right.
purist.
but
You
that's
live
the commentary that I want is with some humor.
Yeah.
Because it gives you perspective.
Yeah.
You know. Anybody over here? Who over there? Dave?
Well,
Is-
you know, I think and you're discussing it as well as what's happening.
As well as what?
What they're discussing is a real threat and fear right now is that dogma that we hear though, like you say, from people that are closed off, blocked, believe their version of the truth. Even when evidence, not my opinion, but evidence to the contrary, is presented, as you said though, Ruthie, and they just keep putting it out
You're
there.
not gonna
They
stop
just
that, are you?
use that, or they just throw it back, and that has been effective, I'm gonna say.
It has
That's
been
a
effective
real
in being
frightening
very
news.
destructive.
Yeah, frightening new trend.
It's destroying our
It is.
world, actually. So but what are you gonna do about it? That's the question. How are you gonna handle it?
Well,
If you try and attack it head on and argue with them, they're not gonna hear you.
that's what I was gonna say, you cannot come like
No.
this head on, you have to
Yeah.
soften and back up, but it is frightening to me that they are being so
It's very
effective
scary
in
times.
turning the tide on things.
One of the things you just said is that you have to soften. And yet the thing that we've been talking about for the past 3 weeks is if I soften, if I show any quarter, that's going to be a sign of weakness. And it's going to be a sign as a fly is flying into my eye. It's going to be a sign that my point isn't being expressed or understood well. And how would you, because I'm offering it to you, it's a good point. How do you show that loving compassion to stand in the truth and strength while there's a form of the foe challenging you?
And most people here are basically from the Christian religion.
No.
All right. But I'm sure that in all of the religions there's something. How do you deal with this? We talked about love. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they do. They
I
don't
do
know what they
approach from
do.
a point of compassion always to
Mm.
try to
Right.
say,
I know you
I
do.
can
I know you do.
understand that from
But you just have
But
to
I-
forgive them and move
Yeah.
on and love them anyway. Mother Teresa, it was never between you and them anyway. It was always between you and God. Or as a Buddhist, it's between you and your own Buddha nature, or just general spirituality. So if you can do anything at all, that's letting it go. That's the first intention.
But Ruthie, I have an issue with that.
Okay, go.
Complacency or letting it go
Mm-hmm.
is just not my way of view. I believe in confrontation. You don't, if you don't confront the evil, if you don't confront what's
Well,
bad.
you just choose how you confront it.
So-
Try to look for a skillful way to do it.
Okay. I can only listen for so much to think that that's just not my DNA. I am a fighter. I grew up on the street
Yeah.
in a city.
Yeah.
Complacency to me, is probably one of the problems.
Well, I really think that's sort of a misinterpretation of what the Buddha's teaching. It's not complacency. It's very activist, actually, right?
We're being
I
shown
just,
time.
This time.
But I
you
want to
know-
hear.
okay.
No, but
No, I have no.
I
just-
hear you.
I just
I
couldn't-
hear you, and it is a.
I had to make my
We
point.
need your kind, but we need them in the service.
one of the things that
What
I'm
created
I'm
what?
DNA, and one of the tools that I do is I ask more questions of those people who are angrily ignoring the facts and so on. I try to get to the bottom of what they're really feeling. And the more deeper down you take, you begin to understand that the facts don't matter to this person. And by asking questions that they can't answer, maybe they'll come to realize that maybe they're holding on to opinions rather than listening to facts.
Try not to take sides. I realize that they've got their side, you've got yours, and here we get to that essential. There's nothing wrong with being confrontational.
It was always like that. It's just it's more recent that there was a time when everybody could talk and come somewhere
Oh, it was.
in the middle.
I grew up in a very, very right-wing family. And one year my dad came over and he said, I'm going to come over here with a gun and shoot you if you vote for Bill Clinton. And I said, oh, that's too bad. And when he was 95, I went into the office one day to help him. He was still going to the office. And he started arguing about something. I said, Pops, I'm not going to fight with you. You know I'm not going to fight with you. And he was quiet for a minute. He said, but I want to. But I want to. Oh. I want to tell you so bad, but he did. So, but we have to work with our own nature and try to turn it in a positive energy flow instead of in a negative one. Because you're going to lose all the power of being confrontational.
It's all about compromise. It's all about finding middle ground.
Well,
Mhm.
that's the Buddhism, which is known as the middle way.
the middle way. And with that, we lead into, and everybody here has done loving kindness, and so they know.
Everybody knows it.
Everybody knows it.
Okay, everybody, take a stretch for a minute. Everybody take a stretch. Oh. It's all such a lot of talking and inquiring. We really, words are very inadequate. We have to go to metaphors and similes. We don't have a vocabulary for divine creation. So we call it love. Because that expresses it the most. It's living. And in dealing with all of these problems, if at the end of the day, when we're disturbed or depressed or angry or disappointed with all those idiots out there, we sit down and we do loving kindness. We begin with ourselves. May I be well. May no harm come to me. May I live with ease, equanimity, balance, calm and peaceful. May I be happy. And then we turn our thoughts and our inner vision to someone we love just with all our hearts. Look at them, smile to them, say their name. May you be well. May no harm come to you. May you live with ease, calm and peaceful. May you be happy. And then we turn our attention to the neutral person. Someone that we're familiar with, but we don't know them intimately in any way. We may not even know their name. If you don't know their name, address them as friend. Dear friend, may you be well. May no harm come to you. May you live with ease, calm and peaceful. May you be happy. And now, we shift our sights to someone with whom we are in conflict. And we begin with a very deep breath or two to get the sensation of releasing ourselves from malice or hatred. And we look at them and say, may you be well. May no harm come to you. May you live with ease, calm and peaceful. May you be happy. You take another couple of deep breaths and you feel your body relax and let go of any kind of toxins that may have accumulated by addressing. You take your hands down and you place them over your heart. And now we are going to address all sentient beings. That's everyone, everything, everywhere. But you need an image, so bring up an image. It can be of a pet or a wild animal. It can be of anything. Just try and make it as all-encompassing as possible. And we say, may all beings everywhere on this plane and all other planes be well. May all beings everywhere be safe. May all beings everywhere be free from suffering. May all beings everywhere be happy. If you feel this organically, you are in a place of creative love. Unconditional love. Unconditional friendliness. And as you practice loving kindness, even confrontationally, it will have a different dynamic. It will be more productive. You will find that you become much more at ease with it. And so now when you're ready, just release your hands. Take another deep breath or two. Put your hands in prayer position, and we will close with our little benediction. Please go in peace.
Go in peace.
Living gently,
Gently,
loving mightily,
Loving mightily,
and bowing to the mystery.
bowing to the mystery.
And I left out making.
Loving mightily.
Loving mightily. I had that in there. I'm into loving mightily today. It's my loving mightily every day. Okay, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Oh, it does make a difference.
Can I make an announcement?
You certainly may.
Thank you.
Who dat?
It's Natalie.
Oh, hey, Natalie.
I